Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibbers Den. My name is Whitney, and today we have my January wrap-up. So overall, I would say January was a pretty good month. Not the most amazing month ever. I only had a couple 5 stars, which typically I really tend to enjoy the books I'm reading, and so I tend to have a lot of 5 stars. The bulk of them were 4 stars, though, so that's still really, really great. It just, it was kind of an even keel month. Definitely didn't push myself very hard. I was really interested in doing other things, especially after coming off December when I read 27 books. That was a lot. And so I definitely, just wanted to kind of take it easy. And if I didn't feel like reading, I didn't really push myself. And there's only one book I didn't get to at all. Everything else I at least started, so pretty good. I had 10 prompts originally. I added on 5 extras, had 2 rollovers, and I did end up finishing 12 books. So, like I said, in that aspect, pretty good. Star rating, at least the bulk of them were 4 stars, so that is something. And yeah, I guess let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to go ahead and start with the stats first, then we'll get into our star ratings, and then the top 3, which the top 3 don't necessarily correspond with the star ratings, so that's always a fun time. But I did read 4,280 pages. 9 of those were physical. There was 1 digital book and 2 audiobooks. The audio hours equaled 20 hours and 1 minute. Fiction, I had 11 fiction, 1 nonfiction. There were no rereads this month. My top moods were emotional, dark, and adventurous. And then as far as genres, again, these can overlap, but there was 4 romance, 4 fantasy, 3 young adult, 2 literary, 2 historical, 2 contemporary, 1 dystopian, 1 magical realism, 1 science fiction, 1 mystery, 1 history, and 1 biography. And so, yeah, that was my genres for the month. And so we'll go ahead and start with the ones I either didn't get to at all or only partially read, and then we'll move on to the books that I actually read and actually have star ratings. So the first one, the only one I did not get to, was The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. And this was for a bookworm, which was same name or initials. This would have gone back in regardless because the bookworms just go back into the honey jar prompt. But since I didn't get to this one and I'm not rolling it over, this will definitely go back into the honey jar prompt. And yeah, this one, I'm reading 3 other very large books. This one's over 900 pages, and so instead of trying to rush those books and then start this one, I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to worry about that one. It will go back on my shelves. It is one I'm highly interested in, and so I will definitely be getting to it later in the year when some of these other big books are no longer on my TBR. So this one will be going back on the shelf. And if you followed my game along, you know that typically my punishment if I don't complete my game TBR is a mandatory rollover. I'm going to help myself out a little bit, so even though that's the only one I didn't actually start at all, that's not going to be my mandatory rollover. I am going to go with one I did at least start, and that's going to be Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. And this one was actually, the original prompt was Lilo and Stitch, which was Nerdiverse rep, which I did not use that because I had a reward, and I wasn't able to get this on my TBR when I was choosing my books, and so I decided to use my reward and choose this because the reward just cancels out the honey jar prompt. So Lilo and Stitch will be going back in the honey jar, and then the reward is just done, so I don't have it to use anymore. But yeah, this one I did start. I'm about a third of the way through, I want to say. Really, really enjoying this one. And so this one will be my mandatory rollover. Plan on finishing this up probably before I dive into any of my other books. And I'm really, really excited to continue to read this because having a blast so far. Then we had the books that have been rolling over. This first one has been rolling over since October, and that's Shogun by James Clavell. I read just under 140 pages of this month, and so I am making progress. I'm more than halfway through. I think I'm at the 720 page mark out of 1,152. So I have I think it's just over 400 pages left to go. So yeah, this one will be continuing to roll over until I get done. I just read about a chapter or two at a time because it's very, very dense, and it's not something that I love because it's very like political and such, and very kind of crude. And so with that combined with the density, I'm just taking my time with this. And so this will continue to roll over until I finish it. I am hoping if I don't finish it in February, I can at least, get really close to the end and finish it up in March. But we'll just have to see how that plays out. And then lastly, we have our rollover since November, and that's the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. Just over 200 pages in, I want to say. And I read about 100 pages this past month. I'm on the Iliad right now, and I had never originally read the Iliad. I had read the Odyssey before, which is what I was really interested in, but I wanted to read both. I'm really struggling with the Iliad because it's a lot of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, and just that whole, I don't do well with a lot of names, especially it's hard to keep them all straight and everything. Like, there's names I'm picking out, obviously, like the Ajaxes and Agamemnon. There's certain names that, okay, when that name comes up, I know exactly who they're talking about, but otherwise, it's just, ugh. So I'm working my way through that, and it's a lot of just battle after battle after battle. So it's like, and with the gods just either sitting up there doing nothing or sitting up there and deciding to help. And so I think I have like 200 pages roughly of the Iliad left. And once I get through that, I think this read will go really, really fast. But again, not one I'm like pushing. I do want to keep reading it, but I'm just taking my time with, so it will continue to roll over until I'm done with it. So there is that one. And then the last one was an extra book that my husband and I are reading aloud, and that's Inheritance by Nora Roberts. I do have the dust jacket right here. And so this is her newest series release. Came out the end of November. And so my husband, her series, we've been reading aloud when they come out. And so yeah, we're making our way through this. I think I have like 160-ish pages left. And so we'll continue to read this. We just read like a chapter or two on the nights where we're not fully exhausted and just ready to conk out. We read a chapter or two of this. And so we should be able to finish this one in February, barring, that we don't read it at all or something like that. This one should get finished in February, but if not, we'll just continue to roll it over till we're finished. But we're almost 2/3 of the way through, so we made good progress in the month of January, but we'll just continue to read that. So that is all the extra books I had. And so like I said, the only one I didn't get to at all was the historian. The other ones I made good progress in, I feel like, anywhere between 100 to over 200 pages on each of those, which is really, really good. I'm happy I'm making progress there. Now, we did not have any DNFs, which are my 1-star reads. If I DNF something, it goes in the 1-star slot just in my journal. I don't rate it on Goodreads or Storygraph or anything like that because I don't think it's very fair. It's not a book for me to rate it. But as far as 2-star reads, we did have one of those, and this was for the prompt of Brother Bear, which was Spiritual Element. And so for this one, I chose one of my ABC title books, which was Cassidy by Lori Wick. So obviously this is for the letter C. And this one, so it's a historical Christian romance, which I love historical romance, and Christian fiction, though, can be very hit or miss for me. One of the problems I have with some Christian fiction is it's very much just find God and everything will be okay, which that's not real life. Just because you believe in God or have a relationship with God does not make everything automatically okay. And so that was definitely a part of this book where like, oh, just, your church family and God, it will all be okay. And it's like, that's not how it works. And so that was a little bit frustrating to me. This just wasn't very fully fleshed out. It was really repetitive in a sense without going anywhere, essentially. Though basically you have Cassidy, and she's a seamstress in this small Montana territory town, and she has a secret. And so she's really worried that if her secret gets out, how her church family and the town will look at her if that secret gets out. There's also kind of a love triangle, which was really frustrating. Like, that whole situation was very weird, and I just didn't enjoy it at all. Like, I didn't like the one character that's like her main love interest. I really liked them as a couple, but the way the situation played out, I just didn't really like at all. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of issues with this book. I didn't hate it by any means. It was a quick, fun read, but there was just a lot of issues that made it where I couldn't fully enjoy it. So that was my 2-star read. That's the only one that got 2 stars. Then we had 3 stars. So the first one is actually the one I read digitally, and that is A Girl Like Her by Talia Hibbert. And this was the read for Autism Reads, which is like a book club read along put on by Kristin and an autistic reader. I'll leave her linked down below, so definitely check that channel out. But this one, I was really excited that it was a Talia Hibbert because she's an author that I've been wanting to try. I've been really, really interested in, particularly the Brown Sisters series. And so I was excited to try it. And overall, I did enjoy this. I enjoyed the characters. The main character is autistic. So I really like, that autistic representation. My problem is the writing's a little crude, which I don't necessarily mind. Keep this in mind. Like, I don't mind reading a book that has crude writing if it fits the characters in the story. But you almost have like this wholesomeness, especially with the love interest. And so to have that crudeness, it just kept like taking me out of the story a little bit because it didn't really seem to fit. So that's where I don't like, like cussing and just crude sayings and such. If it doesn't really fit, I don't enjoy it. And so there was that aspect. And then also some of the miscommunication, because the main character is autistic, some of the miscommunication made sense. Like, I'm, again, not one of those people that necessarily mind miscommunication trope, but it did get a little wearing towards the end. Like, some of it made sense, some of it was like, didn't make sense. So that got a little bit frustrating. And then kind of the antagonist of the story, too, was a little bit like, here we go. so I did enjoy it, but I didn't fully love it. I am interested in continuing the series, though, and I definitely still want to try more from the author. So I definitely will do that. Then we had my Genre-a-thon pick, which for January, it was reflection, looking back before moving forward, since it was the new year. And for this, I went with Anne Frank's The Biography by Melissa Muller. And this one, it would have been more. Like, I loved the information that was given and the way it was given for the most part. My problem with it was, even though she sort of followed a timeline, she also jumped around a lot within that timeline. And sometimes it made sense, again, because it was like maybe a person in Anne's life that wasn't there previously, and now is being presented, so she might give a little background history. So in those instances, it worked and it made sense. But sometimes it's like, you could have given us this information earlier on, and so it was just kind of confusing, like, where are we at on the timeline? So that got confusing, and it also did get a little bit repetitive. Like, I don't know how many times, we needed to learn that Anne is a strong-willed girl, or was a strong-willed girl, or that the Franks were very gracious to their neighbors and friends and such. Like, certain little things like that got a little repetitive. It did kind of smooth out towards the end. It followed a more distinct timeline, and it didn't have that repetitiveness. And that was, once, like, at the height of the war, especially after they were found. And so I enjoyed that. It also gives you a lot of background. I didn't realize there were 2 versions of Anne's diaries, version A and version B. I didn't realize that. And there was also some things that her dad did not include, because, like, there's one point where there was something with their marriage and he didn't like that it presented, their marriage as trouble or whatever. And so he didn't include that. So there's like that background on the diary I really enjoyed, which I want to read the diary again because I haven't read the diary since Anne Frank's diary since I was, I think, in 7th grade, maybe 8th, as when we read it. I remember it was junior high we read the diary. And so I would really like to pick up the diary again. And like I said, I really liked, getting a deeper dive into her friends and family and what life looked like at that point and the events, the progression of events in the timeline. Because it wasn't just, oh, they were in hiding and then, here's the Nazis and they found them and they got betrayed and whatnot. It really goes from the start, like when Anne was a baby. I mean, it's a biography and working its way up, but it includes like the progression of um, the whatever Hitler's political party is, like the progression of that, which I really liked. So yeah, it was more just kind of that repetitiveness and then jumping around that made it really hard for me to follow. But overall, I really did. I was glad I read this. This was the one I almost DNF'd because I was like, this is rough, especially in the beginning because it was really repetitive and it jumped around a lot in the beginning. But like I said, it smoothed out as you went. And it's just really, I think, important. And it worked out. I finished it like a couple days before Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is on January 27th, which I didn't even realize. And so this was perfect to read during that time and just kind of remember the atrocities. And it's just amazing to me how, like, it wasn't just from 0 to 60 where, he just rose to power and targeted the Jews. It was really a progression, and the fact that nobody stood up for them, like, it's amazing. So there's that. And then my next 3 stars was an extra one. This was for Buzzword-a-thon, which is of course put on sort of by Kayla at Books and Lala. So she comes up with all the prompts and then everybody just does it. So I read Once There Were Wolves because it was there, and there was the prompt. And this was actually one I got for Christmas. So it was like, yes, I can read it right away. So this one, I love eco-fiction. Like, I absolutely love anything environmental, naturalist, conservationist, like anything like that. I really typically enjoy. And so I was excited for this one. There's kind of this mystery thriller aspect. It's very literary. And it just got to the point where it was like drama for drama's sake. It did kind of the way it played out. It was like, okay, so all those components needed to be there for this ending, but it was almost like this author had the ending in mind and then put the other stuff in there. And so it just got very drama for drama's sake, and that got really frustrating. So basically, in this one, you have Inti, and she is in the Scottish Highlands, which it was funny because there was a lot of kind of overlap with my books this month. So, reading this and Outlander and the Scottish Highlands, I read The Prison Healer, which we'll get to in a little bit, and I read that right after Anne Frank, and, the prisoners are just a number, essentially, and forced to work in these horrible conditions and such. Obviously, that's fiction, so to compare it to real events isn't really fair, but it's just, having those comparisons. There's flogging in that one, and in Outlander and such, so there's just a lot of like overlap, and I think this one shares a name with somebody, I want to say in Outlander, but I could be wrong, and so it took me a minute to be like, wait, who's this person? And so yeah, there's been a lot of overlap with these books, which I like little connections like that. But yeah, you have Inti, and she goes to the Scottish Highlands, and they're reintroducing wolves to the Scottish Highlands, which of course the townsfolk are not happy about. They're a bunch of farmers, they have like sheep and such, and so they don't want the wolves. And So she's, her and her crew are monitoring these wolves, but she also has her twin sister who has gone through something. Definitely check the trigger warnings before you go into this. And so her twin sister is basically just really struggling. Like, she kind of dissociates a lot and not really present. And so there's times where Inti's really having to care for her. And then in the meantime, she's, dealing with these town folks. Well, somebody gets murdered, and she has a guy, the chief of police essentially, who she's been interested in, but he is a possible suspect for this murder. And so you have kind of that murder mystery, and then you also have the wolves, which that in itself is fine, and I wish it had really stuck to it, but it kept adding these other little drama elements to it, especially with her relationship with her love interest, and then her sister and such. And it does jump back and forth, from her time, like her and her sister growing up, and then around the event that happened to her sister and such, into the present time with the wolves and whatnot. But just all that added extra drama, it was like, I really wish it had focused more on the main plot. And like I said, the ending does kind of come back around, but I don't think it was necessarily like that added drama, and the way the ending played out, I don't think it was necessary for the story. And so that's what dropped it down. Like, this should have been a 4 or 5 star read for me, but with all that drama, just for drama's sake and such, it dropped it down for me a lot, because it's like, come on, here we go again. I don't like that in books. It's like, you have drama points and you have conflict, I get it, but it was just a lot. So check the trigger warnings if this is one you're interested in. This is one I'm going to keep. I could see myself rereading, especially now I know what the drama is going to be. It's like, okay, I can see myself rereading it, because I really do like eco-fiction and such. So there's that one, but like I said, that was just extra for the buzzwords, so I did complete that. Then we're up to our 4-star reads, which we had 6 of those, so that was the biggest chunk. And so first up, we had another one for my ABC title challenge, rather. Well, my title challenge. And this was for Moana, which was Family Expectation. And so for this one, I went with Blood and Chocolate by Annette Curtis Klause. I want to say is how you pronounce the last name. And so yeah, this is obviously for my B title. And this one, you basically have Vivian, and she's a werewolf, and so she's part of this pack. Her father used to lead the pack. He ends up dying, and so the pack has to leave where they're at and go to somewhere new. And so she's going to school, and she meets this boy who she ends up falling for. And of course, the pack is in kind of turmoil, trying to figure out who's going to be their new leader, where they're going to go next, and everything like that. But the pack, there's killings that are happening. And so they're having to figure out who's doing these killings, because they're not supposed to kill the humans, because it puts the whole pack at risk and such. So there's kind of that turmoil, kind of a struggle for leadership and whatnot. And then her internal struggle between her loyalty to the pack and then this love with this human, which also puts the pack at risk. And it does take kind of a turn where you think, this human and her, it does kind of, that's like the focus throughout the book, and then it kind of changes, which I really like that aspect of it. But I'm not very big into werewolves. It kind of gives me an ick. I'm not gonna lie. It depends on how it's done. If they're more like humanoid, like in that aspect, but when they really focus on the animal aspect, it just kind of gives me an ick. And there were definitely points in this where I was like that. So even though I was surprised by the writing and I really enjoyed the writing and such, it did kind of just give me a little bit of an ick. And so that's why it was lower on my 4-star reads, but obviously it still got 4 stars. I still had a good time. I think if you like werewolves, like this is from the 90s, I believe. And I think if you like werewolves, this might be one you really enjoy. So if you're into werewolves, definitely, maybe pick this up if you come across it. Because it was pretty enjoyable. Like I said, I just have, werewolves and animal is not my favorite, depending on how it's done. So that's the bottom of the 4 stars. Then we had the next one, which this one was one I had gotten before, and I ended up not getting to the book, and this is the same book. I chose the same book for it, and that's Brother Bear and Its Alaskan Landscape. So before I had chosen The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah and didn't get to it, and so when it came back up again, I was like, okay, we're gonna finally get to The Great Alone by Kristin Hannah. This one, very slow, which I kind of suspected going in. And basically, you have this family, and the father comes back from Vietnam War, PTSD. There's definitely very volatile relationship between the main character's parents, domestic violence and such. So anyway, they get the opportunity and they go up to Alaska, and of course they have no clue, and so the town really like helps them out, teaches them what they need to know and such. But winter, of course, is hard. It's hard on her father. The PTSD flares up and such in the winter more. And so and they're more isolated in the winter than they already are, in general. And so yeah, I didn't mind the slowness of it, like it really fit the story. And I really liked like the family dynamic. I think some of the side characters though didn't get fully fleshed out, and they were just kind of there, which like there was definitely a lot of quirky characters, but I didn't really necessarily like, other than a couple. It was like, wait, who is that again? Like kind of situation. And I think it really captured the family dynamic well, though, especially the daughter. It's told from her viewpoint, which if it hadn't been told from her viewpoint, I don't think it would have been as enjoyable. But it really captures like her thoughts, like that feeling, like she doesn't realize at first, how bad it is, and then as she's growing up, she's like realizing like, hey mom, like this is not okay. But she loves her father, and so she feels guilty for being mad at him and such. And again, there were certain things that were just felt like drama for drama's sake, which didn't necessarily need to be, things like that. So but still really, really good. This was my first Kristin Hannah. I have a couple others, and I am definitely looking forward to trying more. I love the Alaskan landscape in this one. And I really, like I said, that family dynamic between the core family was really good. It was just some of the side parts that didn't necessarily hit as I thought they would. So there's that. And then let's see here. Oh, I forgot. So actually, the one before that was another extra just added on, and that was the Bromance Book Club by, who is that by? Lyssa K. Adams. I listened to that, and so this was actually before The Great Alone. I just forgot because I don't have it physically. And I listened to that, and the reason I listened to it as an extra was because I had things to do, so I wanted to listen to an audiobook, but my other audiobook was for Allison's Start and Stop Buddy Read, and we weren't ready to start that yet. And so I was like, I want to listen to an audiobook, so I ended up putting that one on. Listened to it in like 2 days. I listened to the bulk of it on the one day and then just finished it up the next. And it was cute. So basically the premise of it, if you don't know, is you have this, it is sports, so I think they're, what are they? Baseball players, I want to say? I'm pretty sure they're baseball players. So you have these group of guys, and they create this book club in order to learn how to love their women better, essentially. And so they read romance books. And so the main character, his wife, he finds out she's been faking it, as far as the O for their whole marriage. And so he gets mad, and then kind of segregates himself, and then she decides she wants a divorce. And so he's, having a hard time, and then teammates that are part of this book club kind of pull him in and give him this book to read. And it was really fun that at first I didn't like it. There was a narrator for the book he's reading. And then, the narrator for the book itself, like the Romance Book Club book. And so at first it threw me off a little bit, but then I really started to enjoy that aspect. I did enjoy the characters. I thought they were fun. It was kind of a little bit funny at some points. And so, yeah, just a fun, light, easy read. It just wasn't amazing by any means. And so my husband at one point had gotten home and I was still listening to it. And he's like, "What is this?" So, but I had a great time with it. It just wasn't amazing, which is why it's 4, not 5 stars. But yeah, it was pretty fun, and I liked, I like the dynamic of them kind of learning each other again and slowing down and taking time, and then also communicating because they weren't communicating. And then, you also have the dynamic of the mean girls, which are the other wives of some of the players who have like kind of a clique. And the main character's wife doesn't really fit into that, and she's kind of been faking that as well. And so they end up going to this event, and he's like, the one girl is like treating her badly, and she's like, "It's always been like this. Like, this is how it always is with them." And so he's starting to realize, like, he's not so self-centered, and he's realizing how his life and such affects her as well. So I like that marriage dynamic. I do enjoy that in books as well. And so then we have The Great Alone. Then we had my other audiobook, which was for Allison's Stop and Start Buddy Reading, which is Allison at a Book Break. Is a channel, again, linked down below. And I really like the whole start and stop body reads. I have a trouble though stopping when I'm reading physically. Like, I don't like hitting those stopping points. Where in this case, because I was listening to the book, it was actually harder to get to the stopping point. Because generally, if I'm listening to the book, I either just kind of put it on and I'm doing other things for a while. But generally speaking, unless I'm going to run errands, it's not that long. Where in this case, it was more I was listening to in the house, so I would do dishes or other chores, and it wouldn't take that long. And so hitting those stopping marks was like, okay, well, now I want to do something that I'm not needing to listen to the audiobook, but I need to keep listening to the stopping point. So it actually helps slow me down, which is what I've been struggling with. And I really like, especially Wayward, like I said, by Amelia Hart. There's a lot of trigger warnings in that one as well, so definitely look those up. And I think some of the issues that other people had with the book, I didn't have because I was listening to it. One of those was like really short, choppy chapters, which is something that gets on my nerves, but listening to it, it was more conversational, so it was kind of slowed down. And so the chapters didn't feel that short to me. And the narrators of this one, like, if you're interested in this one, get the audiobook. The narrators, especially the one for, because there's 3 different timelines, and so the one for the oldest timeline, for Alpha's timeline, was so good. Like, I really, really enjoyed the narrators. I do think this one, with all the different timelines, like, it didn't fully work. I did kind of like that generational family aspect. I do typically like that, but it's just, especially at first I didn't like the middle timeline, which was around, I think, World War II with Violet. So basically you have these 3 women, and the first one, they're all kind of struggle in different ways. And so the first one is she's accused of witchcraft, and so it's kind of that part. And then you have Violet, who's World War II, and then Violet is Kate, who is the last timeline, her great aunt, I want to say. And then so Kate is like present day, and she's fleeing from an abusive husband and such. And so Violet's kind of the bridge between the two. And at first I was like, what's the point of Violet's timeline? But as you get more into Violet's story, it makes more sense. And then Kate's timeline, the reason this didn't get 5 stars for me was specifically because of Kate's timeline, because it was a lot of drama, again, for drama's sake, which I do not like. And Kate especially, like, some of her choices she made didn't make sense. It's like, you try not to judge, like, because you don't know until you're in that situation, but it really didn't make sense. And again, it just felt like drama for drama's sake. Or some of the other ones, like, yes, there was drama, like, especially Violet, but it didn't feel like just for drama's sake. Like, Kate really got to that point, and it was a lot of all these women are victims. It had some good men, so it wasn't like all men are evil, because it did like Violet's brother was good, so it wasn't all men are evil, but it was all women have, a victim story essentially, and I didn't really like that at all. It really got redundant and it took away the impact of it. And so that was part of it that dropped it down. And I think it would have been more of a 3-star if I had physically read it, but because I listened to it, like that put it up there. So yeah, like I said, a lot of trigger warnings, especially regarding like abuse and such. So definitely keep that in mind if you're interested in the book. But I did overall, I really liked like the witchy aspect and the nature aspect, because the witchy aspect has to do like animals and bugs and such, like insects. And so I really did actually enjoy that aspect of it, and the narrators were so good. And so yeah, it got 4 stars from me. Then let's see here. We had Eragon, which was for my game. It was my character pick, which we got Christopher Robin, which is, I went with the coming of age. It's coming of age or middle grade and younger. This is more young adult, but I did go with the coming of age aspect, because you have Eragon and he's, I think, 15 or 16 at the time. So basically, Eragon, he finds this dragon egg, and he's learning, about there used to be these dragon riders, and now he has this dragon, and he is a dragon rider, and he's kind of having to go on this adventure to figure out what to do and such. So this one, I've been excited to read the Inheritance Cycle. This one, again, you kind of have that drama for drama's sake, that angst, which kind of dropped it down for me. Especially some of his, like, I like the story overall, but that angst kind of was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, you're just putting it in there to add drama, and I did not like that. And it wasn't as polished, which he wrote this, I think, when he was a teen, so it makes sense that it wouldn't be as polished. But overall, I really liked the story. Like, it was really easy to get into. It was really easy to follow. Even though, like, it has its own kind of language. There is a language guide at the back, but it just, I don't use those very well. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this. I'm excited to continue on with the series and see where it goes from here. I like the Dragon Rider. I liked, first he has kind of this mentor, which I really liked, and then he gets kind of this other companion later on, Murtagh, which is the newest book that just came out. I think that's what it's called. And so I really like that character as well. And of course, you have elves and dwarves and such. And so it was a fun time. I did see a lot of criticism, like on reviews and such, that said like this is just a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. I recently read 2 of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, plus The Hobbit. I still need to read the last one, but while you can tell that he did get inspiration from it, it is not the same story. Like, he didn't just rip it off and tell the same story. It is different. He clearly got some inspiration from it, like his mentor, blows the smoke rings and such. So there's little aspects that you can tell did inspire the story, but it is not the same story at all. He has this dragon, and there's kind of this treachery and such. And yeah, I really had a great time with this, and I can't wait to continue on. So there's that. And then my last 4-star was another one that was from an old TBR that I ended up not getting to, and this one was a bookworm Instagram pick, so that will go back in as well. And this one was the Book Chatterer, I think. Again, it'll be down in the description on Instagram. And so I just was looking, and this came up, and I was like, you know what? I didn't get to that before. Let's read this. This one is kind of weird for me because it's sci-fi, but it's both easier to get into than like sci-fi, but it's also very sci-fi at the same time, if that makes any sense. And at first I was like not loving this, and I think part of it, like, there's a lot of different factions. I did like it has like the different, so basically you have what's his name? What is Darrow? and he's a red, and so it's different caste systems. And so he's a red, which is the lowest caste system, and they are on Mars, and they're underneath, and they're kind of mining. And they're told that the work they're doing is eventually going to make Mars habitable for others. But what they don't tell them is it's already been habitable for others for hundreds of years. And so you have like the higher casteism, and they're already on the surface of Mars living there. And so there's kind of this rebellion group, and they take Darrow and they turn him into a gold, and he has to infiltrate the gold. And so this first book, he's at the school, which even within the golds, there's different levels. And so he's at the school, and it's basically these different factions, and they're having a mock war in this school. So it's really not a school, it's more like trials. And so the teachers just basically put him down there, and like there's different, like there's Mars, which he's part of the Mars group class, and then there's, different ones based on different gods and such. And so they're having to basically win this fake war. And yeah, things happen. So I think this is a series, the more I get into it, the more I'm going to enjoy it, because this first one, part of why I didn't enjoy it, like it was really hard keeping straight the different characters and which, faction they were in and whatnot. And so I think once I get more into the series, I'm going to enjoy it more and more. And so I really am excited to continue on with this series, even though I struggled a little bit with this first book, just keeping everything straight. Like the story itself was really, really enjoyable. And I did like Darrow. Like he has some things where it's like, come on now. But overall, I really enjoyed his character and such. I enjoyed the dynamic between him and the other characters. And so I'm excited to continue the series. And like I said, I think this is a series that if you don't fully love the first one, the more you get into it, the more you're going to enjoy it. And so, yeah, this one got 4 stars for me. It wasn't like I didn't fully just love it, but it definitely made me excited to go into more. And then I had 2 stars, or 5 stars rather, 2 5 stars, sorry. And this was hard. I debated where to put things. And the only reason this one went farther, because this one I actually enjoyed more so than the other one. But this one went down a little bit because of some inconsistencies, which I'll get into. And so this was a bookworm, which was physical TBR, which just meant, I randomized a number, went onto my computer with all the books I physically own that I haven't read yet, and it chose The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni for me. And there was just a few, and it was just a couple. It wasn't like a bunch of stuff, but just a couple things. And that's why, even though I enjoyed this more than the other one, those few little inconsistencies, I thought the writing in the other one was better. And like one situation, so basically you have, I'm so horrible with names, Kiva, and she's in this prison, which is like one of the worst prisons you can be in. And so she's the prison healer. But she has contact with her family, and so she's getting these notes slipped in. And at one point, a note like flutters out, and her little helper is like, "Oh, this fell out," and so she takes it. There is a guard there, and just prior to that part, she was worried about this guard and watching what she said and such. And then nothing as far as her thought process when this note fell out about what the guard was doing or anything like that. Like, it makes sense in the context of the guard and kind of as she progressed why she wouldn't necessarily have reacted, but Kiva should have had a thought process on that at that point. And then there's this another instance where they're having her and another person are having like a private conversation, and so there's like this bubble to make it private. And then as the person's leaving, she calls out to them, and she's like asking her why. And again, they were all worried about the privacy, and then all of a sudden that's not an issue. So little things like that just was like, come on, like, what about this? But this one, so Kiva's in this jail and she's trying to figure out, just survive essentially. And they get this prisoner who is the queen of the rebellion group, and she's tasked with keeping this queen alive, both by like the warden of the prison and then by the rebellion group who's like, we're coming for her, you need to keep her alive, because there's also a faction of the rebellion group inside the prison. And so the queen is supposed to face these trials, and it's 4 trials that revolve around elemental. So like there's a trial of air, trial of water, trial of fire, and trial of earth. But the queen, the rebellious queen, is like very sick, and so Kiva ends up taking her place, and is having to survive these trials. And I really love the characters. This one though, like I was like, the twist is so obvious, it's so obvious, it's so obvious. And then at the end, I think I was so focused on the other twist that was obvious, I did not see the end twist coming. I read some reviews that were like, yeah, we saw the whole thing coming. And I was like, I didn't see it coming. And it like was like, what? So I really liked the ending. Like it took me by surprise. I loved her, and her love interest is very, very, very slow burn. I really like their dynamic with the one guard. That dynamic I really, really enjoyed. And then there's also kind of a secondary mystery going on because a bunch of prisoners are falling ill, and so she's having to figure out what's causing this illness. So I like that secondary mystery as well. Like, I love this world. I just wanted to stay in it. I can't wait to jump into the second one. So yeah, that was one of my 5 stars, and it was actually funny because the acknowledgement in here is actually thanking the author of my next 5-star reads. So there's that little connection and overlap. And so this one was again one for my ABC author challenge, or not author, ABC title challenge. And this one was The Big Bad Wolf and its unreliable narrative. And so for this one, I went with The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. Or Maas. And this one, I read the first one in the ACOTAR series, didn't understand the hype, was like, what is this? And so I had found this one at a thrift store and went ahead and picked it up. And so this is a series of novellas, for the Throne of Glass series. And so it's like a prequel to that, but it's like 5, I want to say, different novellas. And oh my goodness, like I was not expecting to love that, especially after ACOTAR. I was like, it's probably the same thing. I love this one so much. Like, I didn't particularly like Selena's character, but at first, but then you kind of get to like her. Like, even though she's not likable, like you can understand her motives and such, and just her dynamics with the other characters. I liked, even though this is novellas, it's really told a full story. Like, it's a full-fledged story. Even though each novella by itself is kind of a story, it follows a timeline. And so this is like a whole story book in itself, just comprised of 5 novellas. So I thought that was really cool, because normally with novellas, like, they don't really fit together that smoothly, where this one definitely did. And so yeah, you're just following her on different like things, tasks and such she's set in. My favorite one was probably the one where she's like in the desert, which is, what is it called? Let's see. See if I can find the name of the novellas. Here it is. So yeah, you have The Assassin and the Pirate Lord, The Assassin and the Healer, The Assassin and the Desert. That was my favorite one by far. The Assassin and the Underworld, and then The Assassin and the Empire. And I just like how it progressed throughout. The Assassin and the Desert I really enjoyed. This definitely had unreliable narrative. She doesn't know who she can trust, and you don't know who she can trust, so there's definitely that unreliable narrative there. Plus, she's an assassin, so it's like some of her morals, it's like, what is she going to do in this situation? And so yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed this. I cannot wait to continue the Throne of Glass series. So that was my last read and the top of the stack there. And then of course we had our top 3, which again does not necessarily correspond to the star rating. My favorite of the month was the Prison Healer as far as top 3 and impact. Like I said, the elemental aspect here was just absolutely something I love. I love anything, like I said, elemental, nature, magic, like anything like that. The twist, like how that was done, like I said, I was so focused on the twist and how obvious they were that I didn't see that other twist coming. So I thought that was done really well. I'm not one that's like huge into trials and such in books, but I really enjoyed it in that case. And I think part of that was, again, the elemental aspect of the trials and like just like the impossibility of the task, yet how she managed to like conquer, especially the first ones, I thought was really good. And then the secondary mystery, like I like that, like it was done very well. Because you had the main plot, and then in between you had the secondary mystery she was working on, so it really made the story kind of flow well in that aspect. My number 2 spot goes to Wayward by Amelia Hart. The narrators were Aisha Kala, Helen Keeley, and Nell Barlow. And so they're the reasons like it got one of the top 3. I absolutely really enjoyed the narrators. I love the witchy nature aspect. Like witchy, yes, nature, yes. And when you combine those two, I'm sold. I really liked, I mean, both historical timelines were good, but Alpha's historical timeline, like back in like I think it was the late 1700s, like that timeline in and of itself, I really loved it. And then the generational family aspect, like I do like when you kind of see these generations of family, and different time frames and how they're all connected. I did enjoy that. So the last one is Anne Frank, the biography by Melissa Muller. Again, I like the progression of the event. So you really kind of saw how Hitler rose to power. I like that it focused a lot on the family and friends around Anne and kind of how their lives looked and not just her. The background on the diary entries, I thought that was really cool. And then I also liked at the end, it had a follow up. So on the survivors, like all the people she mentioned that were part of Anne's life and such, the ones that survived, she follows up with that at the end and kind of how their life played out a little bit. So I really liked that. So I only had one book that I hauled in January, and that was actually a Goodreads giveaway. So that, you know, was just a free book that I got from Goodreads, and I'm actually planning on trying to get it on my March TBR because there's just no way I can squeeze it in to February. I am participating in Battle of the Girl Bands, which is put on by Rainy at Rainy Blue Reads. Again, will be linked down below. And so I have quite a bit to read. I'm also participating in Kim from Tales from Two Trails game, which I have been in the past. So again, linked down below. And yeah, there's just a lot of books I have to read. So there's no way I'm going to fit that one in, but I'm hoping I can get to it in March. So I know this kind of got long, but I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite read of January was, if you've read any of these, if you're interested in any of these, all the things. Let me know down below. And if you don't know what to comment and you do just want to support me and let me know you were here, just leave a rabbit emoji down in the comments, or any animal in general, but a rabbit specifically if you want to, just to let me know you're here. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.